British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has met Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at Downing Street just a day before the Trump-Putin summit in Alaska. The London meeting aims at coordinating positions and reinforcing support for Ukraine ahead of the Alaska talks. Starmer has reiterated the UK's willingness to increase pressure on Moscow if it refuses a ceasefire and praised President Trump for creating what he called a viable opening to end the war. Kyiv has voiced concern over being left out of the summit, as Putin is believed to be demanding control over remaining Ukrainian-held parts of Donbas, a condition Zelensky has firmly rejected under Ukraine's constitution. In a joint statement, the European-led coalition of the willing, co-chaired by Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron, and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, warned that borders cannot be changed by force and called for stronger sanctions if Moscow fails to engage in Alaska. Now, for this discussion, we are joined by Professor Veselin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School. Joins us live from Bulgaria. Thank you, Professor, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, do you think that this Ukraine's exclusion from the upcoming summit weaken its position in the diplomatic process?
Yes, ideally Ukraine should be on the table at any discussion about ceasefire, even more about territory. So it's unfortunate that Zelensky is not in Alaska tomorrow. And for that matter, that meeting will be useless. I already said many times, there is no point to meet between Trump and Putin. It will deliver very little in all expectations. Well, unless Donald Trump wants to receive a Nobel Peace Prize, he can do two things. One is to arrest Putin on arrival and deliver him to a tribunal. That will end the war because it will create a vacuum of power in Moscow. And that's the best thing Trump can do in Alaska. Or the second thing he can do is simply ask Putin to make a phone call to his generals and to tell them to stop the fire immediately. If Trump does one of those two things, either arrest Putin on arrival or order him to make a phone call to stop the fire in Ukraine, then yes, this will be a result. Any conversation out of that, any discussion about territory are useless, as I said. I wouldn't be even watching those. So the meeting in London is important because Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, but also yesterday, the video call between all European leaders with Donald Trump were very important, for that matter, to show to Donald Trump how united is Europe, the European Union, but also NATO members. And simply to tell Donald Trump, don't negotiate anything with Putin. No territorial discussion should happen tomorrow in Alaska. Just tell Putin to stop the fire, something we are telling him for the last 7 months. By the way, the call for ceasefire goes back from February by Donald Trump, accepted by Zelensky, rejected by Putin. So all Donald Trump should do tomorrow is to make Vladimir Putin stop the fire. And if that doesn't work, then serious additional sanctions, but also sanctions, secondary sanctions on states that continue to trade with Russia should follow.
And Professor, now you've also mentioned that the growing pressure on Russia, particularly from the European-led coalition, do you think the threat of stronger sanctions will be enough to convince President Putin to make concessions tomorrow?
Well, the Europeans do their best, and they already imposed sanctions for 11 years. Since the Crimea annexation are the sanctions imposed by the Europeans to various Russian individuals and companies. And they were much, much stronger after the invasion, the full-scale invasion in 2022. Europeans did everything possible to limit the Russians to develop weapons and to stop trade. All the European countries stopped trading with Russia a long time ago. The problem with the sanctions are not that Europeans should do stronger sanctions. The problem with sanctions is other countries in the global south, India including, China, Brazil and other countries, they should impose sanctions on Russia. Sanctions don't work if half of the world impose them and the other half of the world is ignorant and doesn't care and make money out of the war in Ukraine. So the question should go to those who continue and even double and triple the volume of their imports from Russia. Those countries need to be held accountable and responsible for the continuation of the war. Europeans did very well so far. My country, Bulgaria, stopped immediately all the import. 90% of the Bulgarian import was Russian oil and gas. We stopped that and we found alternative sources. Well, with some initial hardship, but after that everything went well. Everybody else should do exactly the same as Europeans did.
And Professor, what are the potential consequences if the sanctions fail to produce desired results?
Yes, you're right. If China, India, Brazil, and other countries continue to buy Russian oil, that means more money for Vladimir Putin. And that more money for Vladimir Putin will be given to North Koreans to buy more soldiers and more drones, will be supply the battlefield with more weapons and drones. So exactly, buying Russian oil and gas and other products means prolongation of war and more people will die. That's exactly why everybody in the world should think about and stop trading with Russia. And remember Iraq, Kuwait in 1990 when all the world globally imposed sanctions on Iraq, and after 12 years, Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction. Those sanctions did work. Sanctions against Libya did deliver the terrorist suspects to tribunal. The sanctions before that against South Africa did work by slowly but changing the dynamics in South Africa and finally having the Nelson Mandela in power. So sanctions do work, but they need to be global, imposed by the entire world, and continuous until the result is there.
Yes. Professor Popovsky, thank you for sharing.